It's so funny. Okay, real talk for a minute. So I continually get comments on both my Facebook post, on the Medium article that the Facebook post is linked to, and on Tumblr, and everywhere really. The number one thing that people object to is my personal quota that half of my characters are women. That is the thing that receives more objections than anything. None of my ideas in my article receive half as much blind hatred as my personal quota of having 50% of my characters be women. Hey, chest diver. I think I may have ended up with more female characters than men in some of my books, but the way I apply my quota is I do my outline for my book, and then I look at my characters, and I usually find out that I have created about 70 to 80% men, because that's what I default to. That's what we tend to do, right? We just tend to default to what we've already done. But I am trying to remain conscious and mindful of the fact that I am a white dude writing in a genre that is already 100% dominated by white dudes. So I am trying to make myself different from everybody else in my genre by changing that aspect as one tiny little aspect. Yeah. Anyway, as one tiny little aspect of my stories, which also just happens to comply to nature. Nature just works a certain way. Half of people are women. I mean, yeah. On the binary, in the binary sense, and obviously there's people who are neither and whatever, but it's I have people railing at me that if I want to, that I should just, if I'm so concerned about representation and feminism in fantasy, then I should write my own books, and I shouldn't try to control the way that other authors write their books, which, by the way, I cannot control how other authors write their own books, so that's totally stupid. And then at the same time, there's the people ranting that, that's stupid and ugh. Right, but see, why is forcing diversity any different than if an author ever came out and said, you know what, when I'm planning out a story, I try to make sure that I have all 3 acts in 3-act structure. Then people are going to be like, what's this fucking arbitrary bullshit about the fucking 3 acts? Why do you have to have the 3 acts? Why did Shakespeare insist on doing the 3-act structure except for on the plays when he did 5-act structure? Why was he actually paying attention to his act structure? Why don't you just let the story flow? It's so fucking... It's because people don't see diversity as a storytelling aspect. I don't know what they see it as, but they don't see diversity and representation as an aspect of storytelling. They see it as some social justice warrior bullshit. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. Is like that's the way that I do it. Is I go through afterwards and I look through my book and I'm like, okay, so I've planned all this out and I've got 80% dudes. How about this character? Does their gender play any? Does it play any role in what they're doing? Does it play any? Does the fact that they're a dude have anything to do with their storyline? No, no, it does not. Okay, cool. So let's make them a woman, just so that we can be realistic. Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing that like people like consistently. I mean, very few people say it in a bad or a negative way, and most people are just like, "Huh, that was interesting." Where they're reading a scene where Lauren is like interacting with a couple of different guards, and then and then I write a sentence where it's like the guard stepped forward and lifted her hood, and they're like, "Oh, I did not think. I thought that guard was a man. I There was no reason to think that guard was a man. Why did I think that guard was a man?" That's interesting. And I like doing that. I like having people go, huh, why did I assume that was a dude? Was it because they were speaking gruffly? Was it because they were a guard? Do I expect all of the guards to be men? Huh, like, I'm doing something to the reader, and it's like, I'm trying to, eh. Yeah, I mean, it's weird depending, and you can't have perfect diversity or perfect representation in any story, in all stories. Sorry, there's some stories where, like, if you're writing about the front lines of World War II and you're trying to be historically accurate, the front lines of World War II were a sausage fest, like they just kind of were. Saving Private Ryan shouldn't have 50% of women in the story, and that makes total sense. And for the same thing, if you were to write a story set in modern day America, unless it is focused on a Muslim community, wouldn't make sense to have half your characters be Muslim. Um, and oftentimes, if you're writing a story about there's also like what's the reason for it, right? Like there's lots of oh, what do you call it? Like even if you wrote a story set in modern day America and one of your characters happened to be Middle Eastern, you'd probably never know if they were Muslim because most Muslims don't go walking around saying, "Oh, I'm so totally Muslim" or whatever. But like The Fault in Our Stars is a great example of like, gosh, why do so many characters in that story have cancer? Because it's literally about people with cancer. Like oh my god, okay, Bodega Zilla, so we're literally saying the same thing. Yeah, exactly. And and that's actually one thing that I'm sort of struggling with is like, is that Nightblade has no like right now it, I mean it sort of does, but it's a little too closeted or whatever. It has no like representation of LGBT of the LGBT community, except that it does because one of the characters is gay, except there's no, up until book 4, there's been no romance whatsoever, and now there's one romantic storyline, but it's between a straight character. And so I'm just sort of like, I feel like I'm queer baiting, right? Which is like, I don't think that that's a good thing to do necessarily. I don't know. It's whatever. But at least, anyway, all that matters to me is that somebody tries, or somebody is mindful. Even if somebody doesn't necessarily try, but if they're mindful, if it's a conscious decision. I hate when people are saying, well, I shouldn't worry, like why should I have to worry about that? Why shouldn't I just tell the story that I want to tell? Why should you worry about spelling or grammar? Why should you worry about keeping your pace consistent? Why should you worry about what, paying attention to thing like genre tropes and trying to avoid them? Why should you pay attention to cliches and try to avoid using them in your writing unless you're, flipping them on your head? Why should you pay attention to literally anything that you're doing? Oh, right, because you're an author. It's your fucking job to pay attention to what you're writing. That's your only job. That's why you pay attention. A lot of the stuff has sort of been brewing for a while.